Hello there, you're watching Debrief on CNN News 18. I'm Maha Siddiqui. The world is in a grip of a fresh wave of coronavirus infections. The global economy is unable to get back on track owing to the intermittent lockdown shocks and other impacts of the pandemic. Amidst all this, the only hope comes from the various public announcements of a possible successful vaccine. Today, we'll focus on the race for a vaccine to control COVID-19. From 90% efficacy to 94.5%, Pfizer's announcements have got the West and in particular America hopeful and excited, but not so much in developing countries like India that too are badly COVID hit. Sneha Murdani explains why.
It is the best hope of a quick COVID preventive. Pfizer's vaccine could get emergency authorization from the FDA by the end of this month. India says it is keeping all its options open.
The National Expert Group on Vaccine Administration is in dialogue with all vaccine manufacturers, including domestic manufacturers as well as foreign manufacturers.
But Pfizer's vaccine may not be a viable option for India.
Some vaccines which require, say, -70, -80, it will not be practical to give them in, say, smaller towns or rural areas. If we have some vaccines available and they are at this have to be kept at such a low temperature, then they would be available only in larger cities where facilities like this exist.
For a vaccine like Pfizer's, seamless cold chain distribution is a must. That could be a problem in a country like India. What actually is going to be more practical for us, experts say, is the vaccine that is being developed by the Serum Institute in partnership with Oxford University called the Covishield. Indigenously developed vaccine by Bharat Biotech, which is called Covaxin, or Zydus Cadila Zycov-D also could be the more practical vaccines for a country like India. Both in terms of storage and cost, Pfizer's vaccine seems to be an impractical option for India. The high cost of Pfizer's vaccine is because of the technology used. It's a messenger RNA vaccine, which means it sends a genetic code into body cells, instructing them to produce proteins which then develop the antibodies. Freezing storage temperatures are needed to avoid the genetic code from being destroyed. Hence, the normal vaccine storage and transportation networks can't be used. Experts also say that there is little data about how long the protection is going to last. In New Delhi, Sneha Murdani for CNN News 18.
A year after the first case of coronavirus was reported, the world is getting ready to launch a vaccine, the quickest in the history of mankind. A handful of vaccine candidates are hopeful that the first month of the new year will see inoculations. Which are these vaccines and will India procure them? And where is India in this race? Sneha Murdani with this report.
It is a race to 100% efficacy. 95% says Pfizer-BioNTech, 94.5% says Moderna, and both companies have started to push for emergency use authorization. The news is generating a fair amount of excitement among the medical fraternity.
We now have evidence to believe that COVID-19 is imminently vaccine preventable and that we have selected the correct vaccine target, the S protein or spike protein on the coronavirus. Several other vaccines, including the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, Novavax, Bharat Biotech, Johnson & Johnson, Zydus, all target this same spike protein. So we have every reason to believe that these vaccines, some of which are manufactured in India, will be as effective.
But where does India stand? And are these vaccines doable options for us? Is India even looking at procuring them? Moderna's mRNA vaccine requires to be stored at -25 degrees if it has to be stored for 6 months, or else it needs to be stored between 2 to 8 degrees for it to have a shelf life of 30 days. Pfizer's mRNA vaccine requires to be stored at -78 degrees. Both these vaccines are extremely expensive. hence the subdued reaction in India. So what exactly is India pinning its hopes on?
Serum's official data will only come once they complete phase 3, which I said will be, to my knowledge, in January.
Okay.
Only then will it come.
If everything goes well, and I'm talking about a great case scenario, would we have at least the first doses of the vaccine by the month of February or even earlier?
We can expect in a most optimistic scenario around that time it is possible.
Serum Institute's Covishield, being developed in partnership with AstraZeneca and Oxford University, will be releasing their data before January, and the first doses are expected soon after. Serum Institute of India's chief Adar Poonawala says the institute is going to apply to the government once the data of the UK trial is shared and is shown to be safe. This data is expected in December. 100 million doses will be delivered by the second or third quarter of next year. Other Indian vaccine contenders are in various stages of catch-up. Zydus Cadila Zycov-T is completing phase 2 trials. The data is expected any time now. The company says their vaccine is going to be ready by March 2021. Bharat Biotech's Covaxin has started phase 3 trials already. It involves 26,000 volunteers across 25 centers in India and is being conducted in partnership with the Indian Council of Medical Research. Novavax has also an agreement with India's Serum Institute for 1 billion doses for the country and other low-income and middle-income countries. Russia's Sputnik V is being tested on 100 Indian subjects. A new entrant, Biological E, has started the phase 1 and 2 trials already. It is being developed with Baylor College of Medicine in Houston, Texas, and US-based Dynavax Technologies Co.
जैसे हमारा अनुमान है कि हमारे को जुलाई अगस्त तक जो है 400-500 मिलियन डोजेज जो है हमारे को उपलब्ध होंगी। ये जो डोजेज हैं 400-500 मिलियन, ये 25-30 करोड़ लोगों को मैक्सिमम जो है शुरुआती।
The government is identifying 30 crore people for priority vaccination. They will be immunized by July next year. Doctors and healthcare workers, lab technicians, sanitation and security staff in hospitals and ambulance drivers will get the first vaccine shots. A nodal officer in each district will identify the beneficiaries. The Electronic Vaccine Intelligence Network or EVIN system is being upgraded for distribution and tracking. The system provides real-time information on vaccine stocks and storage temperatures across all cold chain points in the country. While India is not really averse to working out some sort of an agreement with Pfizer's BioNTech and also with Moderna, and also look at procuring these vaccines under the global vaccine COVAX facility, the indication is that we are on the road to Atmanirbharta. There is going to be a lot more reliance on India-made vaccines, the indigenous vaccines, at least 3 of them. India has already said that it is also going to help its neighboring countries to procure some of these vaccines and help in the distribution as well. In New Delhi, with video journalist Umesh Sharma, Sneha Mordani for CNN News 18.
And CEO of Serum Institute of India, Adar Poonawala, spoke at the HT Leadership Summit. He had some good news that the Oxford-AstraZeneca vaccine trials had shown no adverse effects in Indian trials. But when can we expect this vaccine ready for inoculation? Listen in.
If we go back to April, May, never did I even dream, and my team here of scientists at Serum Institute, that we'd have such a good vaccine developed, or all these other vaccines developed so quickly by the end of this year. So whilst, you've got, as you rightly mentioned, the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines that are a little expensive and very difficult to store logistically because of their temperatures, they are seeming to be very powerful and effective. The real question is, how long will it protect you for? You want a vaccine that can protect you at least for a couple of years. That's the goal that the health community and all the developers are trying to get to.
So if we get emergency use authorization, when is the earliest that we can get a vaccine in India?
Well,
we all want to know.
Yes, of course, that's the main question that everyone wants to know. And as soon as the UK authorities, the MHRA and the European, the EMEA, approves it for emergency use, we will apply to the drug controller in India, and hopefully very soon we can also get an emergency use authorization. Again, that'll be, just to clarify, a limited use for the frontline healthcare workers, the elderly, and all of that. So again, for everyone watching, it's going to take another 3 to 4 months before it's available, to the general public, because that's the way the emergency use licensure will probably work.
What you're saying is by April or May, we should all have access to this vaccine, right? In India.
That's right.
That's excellent. And what about children? Because will we have data on children by then, or will it just be for adults?
So in about 3 or 4 months, we'll have data on, the below 18 years of age group. Right now, the vaccines are recommended from 18 plus to, 90 or whatever. And so I think the children will have to wait a little bit longer. But the good news, as we all know, is that it's not so bad and serious for the children.
From India and US, let's now turn our attention to Russia's Sputnik V. It's technically the world's first registered vaccine against COVID-19, but the trials are still underway and being conducted in India too, in collaboration with Dr. Reddy's. What's the progress on this jab that has supposedly been taken even by President Vladimir Putin's daughter? Swastika Das with the details. Pictures of senior Russian authorities taking the COVID-19 jab called Sputnik V put out by the country, including the defense minister Sergei Shoigu himself receiving one shot back in September. All this to send out a message that the vaccine is safe.
Human adenovirus has been tested for decades in the US, in Russia, everywhere, and we believe it's by far a safer approach. And basically what we have is a very established platform, and as you can see, US and Britain also recently started saying they may approve their vaccines before the end of phase 3 trials.
It may have been the world's first registered COVID vaccine, but Russia's Sputnik V was received with skepticism. The emergency clearance in August without carrying out proper human trials gave rise to concerns. However, since then, the trials are being conducted on 45,000 volunteers in Russia, UAE, Belarus, Brazil and India.
Dr. Reddy's lab has gotten approval from DGCI to carry out human trials of Sputnik V in India. The first batch of vaccine has already arrived in the country, and Dr. Reddy Lab says phase 2 and 3 trials of the vaccine will be undertaken very soon.
As of now, about 180 volunteers will be taking the shots in Kanpur's Ganesh Shankar Vidyarthi Medical College. The effect of the vaccine will be studied for 7 months. The vaccine will be administered once, twice or thrice. This will be done in an interval of 21 days depending on the volunteers' response to the vaccine. Russian Direct Investment Fund, the RDIF, entered into a partnership with Dr. Reddy's and will supply 100 million doses after regulatory approval in India. The vaccine requires storage at -20 to -70 degrees Celsius. With Swastika Das, Mahasiddiqui, CNN News 18. Take a very quick break now. Up next, how are the airlines preparing to move these very precious vaccines from one place to the other? The onus of the safe arrival rests on their shoulders and they are bracing up for the challenge. Coming up next in a bit. Stay with us. Welcome back. So while the scientists are doing their bit, the movement of the vaccine safely under prescribed conditions is the job that lies with the transportation industry. CNN's Frederick Pleigen takes a look at how German airlines Lufthansa is preparing to move this precious cargo.
While the world's passenger airlines face an uncertain future because of COVID-19, freight airlines like Lufthansa Cargo are gearing up for a huge operation to try to help end the pandemic. In the coming months and years, airlines like Lufthansa Cargo face the daunting challenge of having to transport billions of doses of vaccine around the world. As a rule of thumb, they say, the colder a vaccine needs to be stored, the more difficult it is to ship it. Several vaccine makers believe they'll be able to apply for an emergency use authorization for their candidates soon. But Pfizer's vaccine, for instance, needs to be stored at around minus 100 degrees Fahrenheit or minus 70 degrees Celsius, requiring complicated cooling. Lufthansa says its pharma logistics hubs are equipped to handle ultra-cold medical cargo, using special containers like these packed with dry ice. Still, keeping them cold enough isn't easy, the head of the pharma hub says.
The temperature, minus 70 degrees, is really a challenge because we have to use dry ice in the bunker. We for sure need dry ice within the compartment, so we need more dry ice. We have another dry ice concentration on board the aircraft, so these are all things that we have to consider.
Another issue, the dry ice emits a lot of CO2 gas. That can be dangerous for flight crews inside the plane, so each cargo flight can only carry a limited amount of containers holding dry ice. The challenges are immense, but the airline says it's been building capacities and consulting with vaccine makers and thinks it's ready to start delivering vials as soon as a candidate gets regulatory approval.
Of course, this is a special situation, but given this, what we have done during the last month with all these masks, with all the flexibility, with all the things we had to produce and to perform on very, very short notice, our team, I believe, is ready for this challenge.
A massive logistical challenge as the world not only waits for a vaccine to be certified, but also to be delivered fast and in large amounts. Fred Pleitgen, CNN, Frankfurt, Germany.
Meanwhile, the phase 3 trials of the Chinese COVID-19 vaccine are underway in Peru. Thousands of volunteers are needed, and journalist Guillermo Galdos reports on why people are willing to take that risk.
8 a.m. at the Peruvian University Cayetano Heredia in Lima. The classroom is full, but these are not students. They are volunteers for China's Sinopharm vaccine for COVID-19.
¿Sabe qué vacuna es la que se está probando?
Sí. China is looking to prove it has a fully functioning vaccine and has been undergoing clinical trials in COVID hotspots around the world. After China and the United Arab Emirates, Peru has the third highest number of participants. Katia Mamani is 30 years old and comes from Cerro El Pino, a neighborhood in Lima heavily affected by COVID-19. She signed up for the clinical trial as soon as registration opened a few weeks ago. Doctors have to give her a thorough medical examination to be sure she's a good candidate for the vaccine. It's a long process. First, she must give blood and take a COVID test to confirm that she's not infected with the virus.
Todo está bien, estás lista para participar en el estudio. Muchísimas gracias por confiar en nosotros. Bienvenida.
Me siento emocionada y agradecida por participar porque sé que esto es importante. De acuerdo a los resultados van a poder ser aplicados al resto de las personas si consiguen que esta vacuna en verdad funcione.
3 hours later, and Katia is finally cleared to receive the vaccine. She's nervous.
Buenas tardes, señorita.
Doctors have warned her that there may be some side effects like fever or nausea.
Señorita, por favor, respire hondo. Listo, Naisha.
More than 7,000 people have already been given China's Sinopharm vaccine in Peru.
Ahora, Shirley.
Scientists aim to reach 12,000 volunteers before the end of the year.
So do you think, Doctor, are we being the guinea pigs of the world?
We have to keep in mind that previous to Peru, 45,000 people had been vaccinated. That the problem is that it was in countries that they don't have new cases. So without new cases, it's very difficult to demonstrate effectivity of the vaccine.
Peru was one of the countries worst affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, which makes it an ideal ground to test the vaccine. More than 40,000 people have died here, and the disease is still far from under control. The Peruvian government is hopeful they can have a working vaccine within the next 2 months.
And while vaccine research is on at breakneck speed, remember there's a direct link established between COVID-19 infections and the rising air pollution levels as well. So it's important that we all do our bit to mitigate this crisis. Let's bring about changes to our daily life which don't add to pollution levels. We have to fight this good fight together.